Morning. So I wanted to do a little different video today. It's been a little bit difficult to try to consistently get out in the garage with it being winter and it just being so cold. It's definitely hard to make time, and usually when I get out there, I want to just be able to get out there and have that be really the only thing that I focus on for at least a good chunk of the day, just because it's really hard to start a project and not be able to finish it. So on top of that, I really am just kind of focused on doing things like that, but as a result, it typically ends up with me having gaps between filming. So with those gaps, trying to put out a video every week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, it gets really hard. I typically like to try to put the video together as I go and continue like editing and putting it together and whatnot. But it gets hard to create what I would call like a quality video, something I would want to watch. So at least for right now, I don't have a ton that I can just like rapid fire, just shoot, get stuff done. Fab projects are kind of slow anyway. They take time. So just a 4-hour, afternoon in the garage can be all just totally focused on just one very small thing. Especially when it's a fab project and something of this nature, where it has to be perfect, has to be square. Everything needs to be like so dialed. It's not rough carpentry, or fabrication in this case. It needs to be pretty dialed. So gonna be trying to make some little filler videos, something like this, just to kind of like talk through where I'm at, like what I'm doing in the back end. So I am working with a few different companies right now to try to see if I can get some things kind of happening to help me basically with some parts that I really am going to need, some specialty things that I am not capable of building myself with the tools and machinery that I have. Obviously everything I do is kind of crude. Building a rear back half on a garage floor that's not level to begin with is something that's proven to be really, really hard. So for the things that I feel okay with, what I would call like outsourcing or leveraging somebody else to kind of help me with that, that's kind of something I've been working on a little bit. It's still going to keep all my ideas kind of in play, but just stuff that's so next level that I wouldn't even be able to consider building it myself. So so that is something I'm kind of working on, just trying to kind of showcase what we're doing and try to get people hyped on it. But I want to break down kind of like where we're at with the build, kind of some of my thoughts, game plans, why I'm doing it, and then from there some of the inspiration and things I've been really like digging into a lot just to learn more. When it comes to the basic ideas, inspiration for doing a mid-engine Subaru build, ditching the all-wheel drive, it really comes down to just building a driver's car. Not to say STI is not a driver's car, but anybody for the most part that you talk to when it comes to track day hero, whatever, you're typically going to find somebody that drives a rear-wheel drive car. Lots of Corvettes, Camaros, Miatas are obviously super popular. All those cars are super popular. You can pretty much hop in and go, and they're really, really good. when you get into kind of the next level of that, and we'll talk about like new Corvettes, because that's obviously some inspiration, like a whole different level. But the new C8 being mid-engine, you look at that, you look at any Porsche, you know, you watch these guys rip through the mountains and different circuits, GT3 RS, you know, watch Adam LZ, you know, just drive the hell out of that car when he had it, of course. And that's all-wheel drive, of course, but rear engine being slightly different, but still all-wheel drive. You know, those are cars that are still drivers' cars. They're very, you know, rear-wheel drive bias. So there is a lot of driver input and a lot of feel there. And so I think that is my major quest, is to like get that feel. With a lot of people think Subarus are just, you know, all-wheel drive and they're perfect, but really you have to dial them in to keep them from understeering a lot. And that's the same thing I run into with Audi as well. But that was really where the mid-engine idea came from. When I started doing autocross this last year, watching like the new C8, even stock ones, go around just the parking lot, the amount of grip and corner speed that those cars carry are just ridiculous. So I did some research, looked into the Cusco car. So Cusco built a mid-engine rally car, obviously very different. But it was something that kind of caught my attention because it does kind of have, you know, doing a mid-engine build does have some heritage behind it. And it's something that they tried, you know, kind of like the Corvette C8. It's not the first mid-engine C8 or mid-engine Corvette that ever existed. There was one that GM built as a prototype, and it never went into production, you know, years ago. But, you know, it is something, it's just kind of where things are moving within motorsports. Obviously, the whole electric thing is a whole different animal, but as far as, you know, everything goes, it's pretty proven that mid-engine cars are, you know, the corner speed, you know, for this particular build, I'm going to be able to get an extremely low center of gravity. The car is going to be slammed to the ground anyway, so center of gravity is just going to be kind of ridiculous. And so there's some creative things that I have to do to kind of make that work. Of course, with any Subaru race engine, anything that is going to be, you know, going around the track and not just in a straight line necessarily, there's consideration of like a dry sump system in there. Of course, that's something that is in the back of my mind. Even with that, that's something that I'm really not willing to pay for. I will gladly buy the parts that I need that I can't make myself, and I will build it myself. No, I'm not an engineer, but I'll figure it out. There is enough information out there for me to dig deep and kind of figure that out myself, and I'm pretty much already there. I know how that would work. So, but with that said, like, you know, I would like the car to make somewhere around the 500 horsepower range. Being that we're talking about center of gravity, the engine's going to be very low in the chassis. It's going to basically be solid mounted for the most part. There's going to be some play in it. You'll see that in the next video that comes out. There'll be some dampening there, but pretty much solid mounted otherwise. As far as power goes, like I said, about 500 horsepower would probably be an ideal spot. I would not like the car to be beyond 2,200, 2,300 pounds. That would be the goal. Of course, that might need, you know, a little better roll cage when it comes down to it when we get there. But I mean, you know, you can always redo stuff. That's half the fun. May do it better the second time. But then there's a lot of things that like you kind of come across and you have to think about all the accessories. You can't just mount an engine in the back of the car and expect it to work. So cooling, intercooling, you know, your boost charge pipes, like where is everything going to run? Are you running like twin radiators on the side of the engine with some sort of intake in like the quarters, or are you running the radiator in the front? Are you running it just flat? Are you running like a V-mount setup with the intercooler up front too? Do you mount the intercooler in the back with some sort of scoop to use like a factory style STI top mount intercooler? You know, there's a lot of options. So those are all things that I pretty much have in my mind, exactly how I'm going to do it. Of course, lots of measuring and things to kind of go, but the main part of getting the chassis done and everything kind of dialed in, right now we're focused on the rear of the car. Once we're able to get that in, I will then switch to the front end of the car and start to work on that. The big thing with what I am trying to accomplish is just simplicity. I really want to have, I mean, it sounds a little silly, but as little hardware on the car as I can. Necessities. I don't want anything to be, you know, a part that bolts onto a part that then bolts onto a part to mount something. I want it to be simple. You know, I've got parts for transmission mounts and engine mounts, and I don't really see a benefit of putting, you know, for anybody that knows the Subaru engine mount process, there's the engine mount plate, and then there's the mount itself with the dampening in it, and then that bolts to the cross member, and the cross member bolts to the car. I think that's very overcomplicated. Simple is better. Of course, crush zones and you know, points that need to give, that's fine and all, but when we're talking about a race car, everything should be solid as far as like bumpers and things like that. It's not a drift car, so I'm not worried about that. So once we get the framework, everything where it needs to be, again, I'm basically raising everything up roughly 2 inches to kind of account for where I need the suspension to sit in relation to the engine and the axle outputs and the trans. But also it's gonna help me, you know, get my center of gravity low while keeping the correct suspension geometry. So that's gonna be done front and rear. Front towers are gonna be basically cut out as well. So that's something you can kind of expect pretty soon. And then tying everything into the cage and how that's gonna work. So at that point, once I start to get to the point where I know where all of the main like structure of the car is going to be, that's when I can start to really work more on kind of the cooling and the aero package. It's not going to be like crazy aero or anything, but it will be what I would call like weekend warrior track day type of scenario. I'm not going to have so many things on the car that it's just undrivable on the street. I want to be able to drive this thing. I'd love to be able to drive it to work, you know, cruise it and things like that, as well as take it to the track. So, you know, maybe some of this stuff will be removable or something, but I don't plan to have it, you know, have Pikes Peak aero on it or anything like that. It's just going to be very simple. So lots of inspiration for aero, and I've been doing a lot of research actually from Pikes Peak, because their aero, anybody who knows Pikes Peak race cars, aerodynamics are just a really major factor. Very different there because of the air density and kind of how that factors into downforce, but what it does is it forces them to overbuild everything and then it becomes a little easier to understand, you know, by looking at it. The mathematics are still very hard to understand for me, but looking at things, it's easy to get the idea of what they were trying to accomplish with getting air to flow over the car and things like that, and flow through the car, under the car, and how it all works in harmony, and then how it helps things like the cooling. So radiator, intercooler, brakes. So anybody who is a Ken Block fan, like myself, the Huna Pegasus is a really cool build that they did for Pikes Peak. Unfortunately, Ken wasn't able to run the car. It basically blew the engine before they were able to run it, and then he passed what ended up being a few months later, very recently now. But it is, you know, there's a lot of cool things that they did with that car. Obviously being, it was, you know, mid-engine as well, all-wheel drive, a lot more power, of course. The thing made like 1,400 horsepower, so all-wheel drive, and they made it a driver's car. I'm sticking to the rear-wheel drive. I think it's going to be fun, but you know, that car is really cool to look at, and just look at the engineering that goes into it and how it all works. It's really an amazing machine. So looking at that and using some of the things that they did as inspiration, it's something where I can picture that and then start to plan how I'm going to integrate some of those ideas into the Subaru. So maybe not as pretty, definitely not all carbon fiber, but it is going to be something that it's gonna help the car do what I want it to do. I don't think I'll ever push it to the point where, you know, I'm going to really need just that much downforce like they would on Pikes Peak. I really enjoy the idea of just not stock, and making everything as efficient as it can be, using the air that's flowing by the car for as many things as you possibly can, cooling downforce, which affects, you know, power out of the engine, of course. And if it's, you know, running hot, you're not going to make power that goes for the, you know, radiator as well as the intercooler, especially. Braking, brake ducting, and cooling your brakes off, even cooling the exhaust manifolds or headers. Those are all things that can be impacted by the aero and efficiently using the air. So pretty cool. I've been doing a lot of research on that. You know, my wife asks me a lot of times, like, what I'm reading, what I'm looking at. Typically I am like just Googling up a storm. I've got this app on my phone that's called Wind Tunnel, where I goof around with different ideas that I have. You know, very, very just rough things that I just mess with just to kind of feed my insanity to put this car together. And I just want it to be different and cool and one of a kind. I think it definitely will be that. But and I mentioned this before, is that this car currently, I don't have any ridiculous budget for it. I am on a very minimal budget. If I spend even a couple $100 every few months on the car, you know, that would be surprising. You know, I bought steel, some 1.5x3 steel tubing for chassis stuff and what I'm building right now with the back half. You know, that was a couple bucks. That's probably, you know, I'll put off buying things for a little while, you know, just because the car, I don't have the budget to sit there and go build a $12,000 race engine for it. I'm not there yet. So again, a big part of why I'm taking my time and opting to build for, build the majority of these parts that I'm going to need. Really, I'm trying to do it on a budget. Second of all, being that I'm on a budget, I am not in a hurry to get to those things that are going to be very expensive. When it comes to that point, I'll, be ready. But when it comes to taking the time and building the frame myself, I could just go out and buy any old, STI and swap everything in, have an STI swapped 22B, throw a wide body on it like I want to, all those things. I don't want to say that's too easy, because that's a task in itself, and there's lots of people who have some just badass cars that have done that or similar things. Bucky Lasek, for example, icon for me, first of all. Signed my wheel for me. Super cool dude. Is even gracious enough to chat with me every now and again on Instagram and things like that, just because I like to pick his brain. The guy's been through so many different things within motorsports, and it's just he's just cool to talk to, and he knows a lot. But the bucket, his build, is honestly part of what started this. I had the idea of wanting to build a 2-door coupe for a minute, and I finally saw Bucky buy a car, which ended up being the bucket, and start putting it together. So that kind of inspired me to finally go and buy one, and that was the $100 shell that you now know as the mid-engine GC8. So pretty cool. Always really pumped that he's willing to chat with me about that stuff. But I love his car. It's sick. And even though I want, to probably have an all-wheel drive one too eventually, maybe, knock on wood. I hope it's possible. This is going to be something that's going to be cool for me to build, and it's going to hopefully grow my skills as a builder. So pretty cool. But yeah, chassis, aero, powertrain. Again, we'll be going with a 6-speed. Things right-hand drive. I still have to think about what I'm doing with the front end. And then I didn't even mention that part of it. So obviously I still have the stock floor in the car. That's something that I am considering going a little drastic on, with a flat floor situation. Definitely going to be redoing the firewall anyway. So it is something that I'm very much considering. I'm as deep as I am right now, so it's almost like I might as well. I've got the time, of course, without being in a hurry. And it's something that I can do, and it's not very expensive to do. It's just material and my time. So, and that's going to allow me to learn a lot. So, would be cool. I can definitely save some weight and then tie in the front and rear with that. Do some different things with the cage to kind of do that. Be able to adjust my seating position. Not really happy with where the seat's mounted right now. So as you can see, I've got a long ways to go with things that I can do myself and do it very cheap. And then as we go and we get closer to the point where we're ready to start talking about an engine, trans, axles, wheels, suspension, aero. Aero is going to be a big one. It's going to become a car when I get the body work on this thing. It's going to be really coming to life at that point. But until then, the things that I'm doing are going to be what sets this car apart from any other Subaru that exists. So that is why I'm doing it. I want to challenge myself I want to learn, and I want to do something different. I want to freak people out when they see it for the first time, and I want them to ask what it is. And I want them to think that somebody bought it like that. So that's the goal. It's a challenge for me to up my game, learn, do it on a budget, of course, and you know, have fun doing it. The ultimate payoff will be eventually ripping around tracks with this thing and showing it off and talking to people. I already talked to a lot of people who have similar projects or who are just diehard Subaru people, and they love the idea of someone doing something different. Maybe they don't know if they have the skills to do something similar. That's where I hopefully can inspire some people who aren't confident in their skills to just try it and fail, break it, go back and learn how to do it better the next time, and you know, go back to the drawing board and probably break it again. But that's part of the fun. That's why we do what we do, and I'm really glad that I decided to start this project. So I know this is a super long video of me just talking to the camera, but it is, you know, a little bit of filler, a little bit of a preview of what's to come. But either way, I appreciate you hanging out. I hope you have a great weekend, and yeah, stay tuned for more of the mid-engine Subaru GC8 build. Our next video, it honestly probably won't be out for another few weeks, but I will be basically getting a lot of the big parts that need to go into the rear of the car in there. So stay tuned for that. Appreciate your time. Again, like, subscribe, and follow along. Appreciate you. See ya.